And then in your particular field, I guess, to move over from that, what would you say is something that you find most enjoyable about this or most compelling in regards to the Shroud of Turin?
Sure. I mean, the most compelling thing for me is how it relates to the resurrection. I mean, Paul says that our faith is in vain if not for the resurrection. And I believe that the Shroud of Turin is a potential key here. I think it is the closest we're going to get to naturalistic evidence of the resurrection. And that's a massive thing. No other religion can really say such a thing, except Christianity, if this is true. There were studies about exactly how the image got onto the shroud. The image is not paint. It's not really, doesn't seem to be organic, like body fluids or anything. It's a very faint image, but detailed image with 3D attributes to it. And it's only on the top layer of the fibrils, of the linen fibrils. It doesn't bleed through. You know, of the thousands, maybe millions of fibrils on the shroud, not one bleeds through. I mean, really incredible stuff. So how is this able to be replicated, and what exactly is this image? Well, I mean, there's a lot of theories about what it could possibly be, but there is some indication. There was an Eastern Michigan study that connected it to possibly possibly an X-ray, like an ancient X-ray image of some sort of radioactivity that occurred on the person associated with the shroud. And we can get into that a little bit as well if you guys want to talk about that. Does anyone, do you have any thoughts on what I've said thus far?
Yeah, I guess my one question would be, how would the shroud compare to, in your opinion, to other like historical artifacts? Because I know there's some groups that claim to have a thorn from the crown that Jesus wore on a cross, and there's other groups that claim to have like a cloth. But what makes this one to you think stand out even more? Is it just more the naturalistic evidence on it?
There's really an abundance of evidence on this specific relic. You know, I myself am a Protestant. I have no particular care for many of the supposed relics that are flaunted by the church. But this is totally different. I mean, there's so much detail and information within the image that would lead us to believe that it does have a first century origin. We can get into some of that as well later on if you like to, but just the sheer amount of information on the image itself is incredible.
Thank you. And we could get on to the next thing you want to expand on more about.
Yeah, I wanted to go through a potential just timeline for people so they can kind of understand like where this thing came from. So there's the official timeline. We'll just start with the official timeline. The official timeline is that a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny, who, you know, no slum, this guy's renowned. He fought during the 100 Years' War with the British. He was also involved in one of the last hurrahs of the Crusades, an expedition to the city of Smyrna. So he was a renowned and respected guy. And I mean, this is important, right? Because a lot of people attribute the shroud to be a forgery. Well, I mean, we're talking about a knight here. We're talking about a renowned knight who had a fief, who was respected by everybody seemingly at his time. Essentially, he had this thing. He had this shroud, and he displayed it in his fief in Leary. He started a kind of like college in the fiefdom, and it's unclear if it was displayed like at a church within the college or what. That's probably where it was. By the 16th century, it moved to Chambéry, so that's like the Savoy area of Italy. I guess on the border of Italy and France. And it was essentially gifted to the House of Savoy. So the rulers of Savoy got this, and there was a fire, and this fire damaged the outside of the shroud, and these damages are still here today. And this goes into what we can talk about a little bit later with why the X-ray is flawed. The damage that it took dates to around the 15th century. So That's why potentially the X-ray results were flawed. It's because they were looking at and doing radiocarbon tests from a part of the shroud that was last touched in the 15th century, of course. So, point is, from here, after the damage that it receives, the Duke of Savoy orders that the cloth be moved to Turin, and it's remained there since. It's been looked at by the Church. The Vatican has at points taken it for itself, but it's still, I believe, in Turin. So that's the official timeline.
And then you said the debate intensified again around 1988 with the whole radiocarbon stuff going on, and then today.
Well, even before that, in 1898 is when we get the renewed interest in the shroud. I mean, it's at Turin forever. People just think of it as, another relic, another Catholic relic. There had been some like intermittent interest, but nothing significant. And it's understandable why. I mean, the shroud without the technology to invert the image is really not compelling. It just kind of looks like something anybody could do. It's not detailed at all. But it's actually a photograph from Secondo Pia in 1898. This photographer guy, where, the new technology at the time, the shroud had never had a picture taken of it, at least a recorded picture taken of it that we know of. Pictures at the time, I talked about this a little bit earlier, pictures at the time inverted when you would first take the picture. So if it was a negative image, it would come out a positive image. If it was a positive image, it would come out a negative image, and then you would have to process it, and then you can, and then it becomes the desired image result. Well, when Pia takes a picture of the shroud, it comes out as a positive image. It doesn't come out as a negative image, and just so much detail is visible from this picture that people hadn't noticed before. So you just have such a renewed interest now in what this is. Why is this thing a negative image? And why is there all this detail that we hadn't noticed for hundreds of years? And so you just have tons of speculation after that into the 20th century. But it really isn't until the Shroud of Turin research project with Mr. John P. Jackson that we were talking a little bit about before, that the modern timeline of the shroud as a scientific endeavor really begins.
Hazy, do you want to add on to any of that as well? One moment.
No, I'm quite all right. No, sorry. There was a malfunction on my side, my microphone, but I'm doing good now. No, we can continue from where we're going right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask Luca, I was going to ask Hazy if you want to say anything, but really quick, what are some other key components you think the audience should be aware about in regards to the shroud? Because we covered the timeline, we covered the different ways of studying it. Is there anything else that you'd say is pretty important?
Yeah, let's get into what's on it. So what's on it is fascinating. There are observable pictures of various fauna that date to the 1st century. There is potentially a picture of, so when people would die at the time, they would place coins over the eyes. I'm unsure exactly why they did this. I'm sure it had to do with the decay or something of the body. But there is observably coins on the person's eye in the image. And the coins date to the 1st century because we can see on the coins that there are Greek letters depicting the Caesar at the time of the said crucifixion. And if we reconstruct it, we don't have a complete picture of what the Greek letters say, but if we reconstruct it, it probably is Tiberius. That is just a direct correlation with the 1st century. You can't get any closer than that. But the image itself, it's just so fascinating. The depictions of blunt trauma, the fact that the way that he is crucified was done in such a way that was unbeknownst to the 12th century or the 13th century when this thing was supposedly artificially created. They had no idea. All the images of Christ in the 12th and 13th century depicted the crucifixion of his hands, the nailing of his hands, in the center. Crucifixion had been abolished. People didn't really understand what was entailed. And even today, when we think of an image of Jesus being crucified, we think of as or nailed.